So, as a judge, what is the mindset you should have entering into the debate? You have to keep in mind that you have two roles. One is you are there to evaluate the debate. You are there to give a fair decision of what happened in the debate, right? But you are also there as an educator. So, by way of that, you are responsible for the futures of the team in that debate, and you owe it to them to give them a fair decision, to give them good feedback. You need to take notes in a way that tracks the arguments and the responses. So some judges are more comfortable flowing, right? As in they fold their sheets, their paper 6 ways and track all the arguments and have all these arrows. Some judges are more comfortable just taking notes as the debate happens, chronologically, different sheets of paper, whatever works for you. As long as you are able to identify the argument and the response to the argument and how the debate progressed. When evaluating the debate, you are supposed to disregard personal biases and specialized knowledge on the topic, right? So you're not supposed to say, but I actually don't agree with this topic. That doesn't matter. The adjudication panel thinks that it is a fair and debatable topic. So you should disregard those biases. And you should also disregard your specialized knowledge. So maybe you read somewhere that this fact is true or not true. That doesn't matter, because the debate is not about you. You do not interfere in the debate. You only weigh up the evidence that is presented in the debate by the debaters. So even if you make one side win, that doesn't mean you personally believe in that side. All that means is that those debaters debated the debate better, right? So don't confuse these two things. So that's your job as an evaluator. Now, as an educator, what is your job? You must provide informative and detailed feedback in your ballot and oral adjudication. Those ballots will be turned over to the debaters and their coaches later on, and that is their source of information and feedback on what happened in the debate. So if someone looks at your ballot who wasn't in the debate, hopefully they will get an idea of what sort of happened in the debate, what important arguments were argued, and how well these things were argued, right? So that's the mindset you should have entering into the debate. Alright, just really quickly, this is how the Karl Popper format looks. And you'll see this live later on. So you're going to have the affirmative constructive speaker, who is A1 and the first speaker in the debate. This speaker gets 6 minutes to set up the debate and present arguments. After which you will have a cross-examination from the first negative speaker. The cross-examination lasts 3 minutes. Then the first speaker from the negative comes up to speak. This person also has 6 minutes, and then gets cross-examined by the previous speaker from the affirmative, right? And then you get the first affirmative rebuttal, or the second affirmative speaker, that's the same thing. And this person gets, where is this? 5 minutes to speak, so that's 1 minute less than the first affirmative speaker. Then this person gets cross-examined by the first negative speaker, and this cross-examination lasts for 3 minutes. And then you have the second negative speaker, or the first negative rebuttal. Don't get confused, it's 1, 2, 3. This person also has 5 minutes, then this person gets cross-examined by the first affirmative speaker, that takes 3 minutes. Then you have the second affirmative rebuttal speaker, or the third speaker of the affirmative, and then the third speaker of the negative. So the third speakers do not get cross-examined, alright? So it gets a bit simpler there. Alright, very briefly, what are the speaker roles? The first affirmative speaker has to define the resolution fairly and in a way that reasonable people are likely to define it. I'll give you an example. So if we give the motion, this House would legalize that we should legalize euthanasia, or that we support euthanasia, and you come up there and say, I am a farmer. My cow is infected with mad cow disease. I will mercifully kill my cow. That is not a fair definition, right? Because everyone knows, any reasonable person who looks at that topic knows, that the debate is about human beings. And if that happens, the opposition side can complain, and they will probably be right if they complain, right? And you might lose, or will probably lose. So your duty in this debate is to provide a fair and a reasonable definition. That doesn't mean you have to copy off a dictionary, but it has to set the terms of a clear debate and fair one. After which, the first affirmative speaker has to present all the arguments that the affirmative would make in support of the resolution. So if that argument is going to come out in your deed, it has to come out in your speech. Alright? The first negative speaker has to present both the negative case against the resolution as well as against all of the affirmative's arguments that the affirmative provided. So the responses have to come out in the negative speech, and arguments in the negative side also have to come out in that first speech. What the second speakers have to do is address the arguments that came before them and offer new evidence, examples, analogies, or narratives to better clarify or extend and support the arguments already introduced by the first speakers in their team. But what they're supposed to do is extend an already existing argument. So extend or expand it, but the argument already has to be there. The original argument or idea cannot have come from them. Third speakers are meant to summarize the debate by identifying the key voting issues or the key points of clash and weighing up each side's argument and rebuttal. So you don't have to respond to everything that happened in the debate anymore, but you are supposed to deal with the most important things and tell us why those are the most important things. To the judges, you are supposed to disregard new or original arguments presented after the first speeches. You do not have to punish the speakers for this. You don't have to go, oh, -5 because it's new. Because if you are already disregarding it, that means you have already penalized them. So you don't have to doubly penalize them for it. Because if you're disregarding it, that means they have less time to make an impact with the existing material. So you don't doubly punish, you just ignore all that new arguments that come out after the first speeches. In cross-examination, this is for debaters, but for coaches to remind their debaters as well. Cross-examination is used to ask questions to clarify certain points that are being made by the other side, certain definitions, or what they mean when they set out criteria, to lay the foundation for your own team's case, to refute the claims of the other side. So you are allowed to present alternative data or alternative examples, or alternative hypothetical situations, but you are not supposed to be rude or belligerent to your opponents, whether you are asking questions or answering questions. That just makes you look like you're hysterical and out of control. It doesn't add to your credibility. Do not restrict your opponents from answering by insisting on yes or no answers, but this burden cuts both ways. At the same time, if you are answering, do not waste the cross-examiner's time by giving long-winded answers to prevent future questions. So this cuts both ways. Alright. Now, in terms of time, and this is more for the judges, one of the judges should be keeping time throughout the debate. Before the round begins, you should agree on time signals with the team. Are you going to time up or down? How do you display time going down, the passage of time, whatever? Agree with that. Agree on that with the teams. Apart from prep time before the round, for limited prep, teams have 8 minutes of preparation time that they can use during the debate. Right? They can divide this time however they want. It's up to them. So they don't even have to use it. They don't have to finish the 8 minutes. Teams should signal to the judges if they want to start using prep time. So you can just go, can we have a minute? Can we have 30 seconds? If you're not sure, then you can just go, can you keep the clock running? That's fine. Or if you initially want the 30 seconds and then you want more time, you can go another 30 seconds, please, right? Just make sure you signal to the judges. The judges also have a job, the judge who is keeping time has a job to update the teams every time 30 seconds has lapsed, right? So you can go 30 down, do you want another 30 seconds? And maybe you can give them updates of how much time is left. But you're supposed to keep a tally and they have a total of only 8. So beyond that, sorry, they can't use any more prep time. So teams, think about this strategically as well. Okay, explaining the decision. We all seem to agree that the best way to explain the decision is to give the decision first. So it's to say, hello, I gave this to the affirmative team. These are my reasons. The reason this is the best way to do it is because if there is suspense and teams are nervous and don't know how you call the debate, they will not really be able to follow what you're saying. And it's hard for them to have a point of reference to compare what you're saying when they don't know who won or who lost. And if you don't give your decision, you will also be purposely making yourself vague because you don't want to give it away and you want to be mysterious, which means your feedback won't be as sharp or as effective. So I think it's really better if you just give your decision first and your reasons after. So identify the key issues and who won them and why. It is important to offer both negative and positive comments for the team. Of course, you should be critical because they need to get better, but you also need to be encouraging because it's not easy to go up there and speak for the amount of time they do at the age they are at. You are supposed to stay away from vague and generic statements. So do not say, this argument made no sense to me and that is why you lost. What does that even mean, right? If you are going to say that the argument was unpersuasive, you need to explain why and how. So was it because there was a lack of evidence? Was it because the premise was challenged and they never defended the premise against the challenge? So instead of, I thought this was good, or I thought this sounded nice, you need to be able to explain why it was good or why it sounded nice. Alright, and now we go to the difficult and tricky issues. First question, can second speakers make new arguments? The answer is no, they cannot make new arguments, but they can extend existing arguments. What is a new argument? It is an entirely original idea that was not present in the first speech. And so therefore, new examples and new analogies are not a new argument. So remember, the second speaker isn't there to just come up and repeat everything in the first speech. They are supposed to advance the debate. But they do that by offering more clarity and more development on existing arguments. Can third speakers bring new arguments? Obviously not. They should summarize and break deadlocks in the debate. If they provide new arguments, like we said earlier, ignore them. This one, another tricky question. How do I judge cross-examination? Should I just put my pen down and not care? Obviously not. You must listen carefully in cross-ex because one is very exciting, but two, this is the time when teams clarify their position and they try to make the other side concede to certain things. So in general, as a judge, you should hold teams accountable for the concessions they make under cross-ex. So for example, if a negative cross-examiner keeps asking a line of question that reveals a weakness in the affirmative case, and the affirmative case concedes in the cross-examination and goes, yeah, actually we were wrong, or yes, that was a contradiction, or makes a concession, then you have to count that against the affirmative when making your decision, right? But at the same, so you don't ignore things that happen in cross-ex, they should factor into your decision. But the extent to which they factor in your decision also depends on the debaters. Debaters have a responsibility to make use of the material that they extract in cross-examination to use it in their speeches, right? That is the smart, strategic thing to do, to refer to the things that happen in cross-ex in their speeches. So if they do that, life is good for them and for you. But even if they don't do that, you should still factor in, to a lesser extent, the things that happened in cross-ex and the concessions that were made there in your decision as a judge. So you should still be taking notes at this point. Next tricky issue, how do I evaluate style? Style and delivery are obviously very important. Otherwise, we will just write each other emails. So there is a public speaking dimension to debating, right? However, especially in an international tournament such as this, style is also very diverse. It's hard to quantify what good style is. Some debaters can pull off humor, others don't. So if someone cracks a joke, it's really good for them. If someone else does, it's just sad. So how do you quantify good style? And it's also more open to the personal preference of the judge. So what we do in KPDC is we do factor in style and presentation when assigning speaker scores. But as much as possible, we don't factor it in when we make actual decisions. I also want to emphasize that there is no single superior best style of debating, right? It's not about, and it is not about English speaking skills at all. Sometimes, the more big words you use in your speech, the more unclear you become as well. Next tricky question. Does the affirmative need to provide a policy all the time, always and forever? No. They are not mandated by the rules to provide a policy. Sometimes it is a strategic choice for them to provide the policy because it helps clarify the debate and their position. Then by all means they should, but you should not expect it of the affirmative team. If the affirmative provides a policy, does the negative have to provide a counter policy? If they want to, yes, but that is not a necessary burden on them. They can choose to defend the status quo, or they can choose to introduce some slight modifications to the status quo, which isn't exactly a counter policy per se. So they can just go, we will improve on this aspect of the status quo. That's fine. Again, we shouldn't have preconceived ideas of what teams should do before the debate. Alright. What happens, and please, I hope this never happens, what happens when the negative team disagrees with the definition or the restrictions set up by the affirmative? When this happens, if the negative comes up and says, we don't agree with how they've defined the motion, we think it's unreasonable, we think it's unfair, when that happens, then the definition becomes part of the debate. It becomes part of the debatable issue in the round. It becomes a voting issue, which is really, really sad because you're not debating the fun part of the debate. But the negative team, if it wishes to introduce a new definition or to challenge the definition, has a high burden because the affirmative team has a right to define the motion, right? So if you're going to challenge it, you have to be able to convince us that the definition was indeed unfair or unreasonable, not just something you didn't like or didn't feel like or didn't expect. So you are held to that burden. And how do the judges decide now? So judges decide the debate based on that definitional question, but also based on the other arguments in the debate. So there's no absolute loss, but it becomes harder, obviously, for the judges. Do speakers need to refute every argument? Ideally, yes. But of course, we have limited time. 5 minutes, guys. So it's not a requirement. They can choose to prioritize refuting the arguments they perceive to be more important. You should evaluate, like I said earlier, the quality, not the quantity. So it is up to the debaters to explain the importance to you of a dropped argument. If the negative team ignored one of the affirmative team's arguments, that's bad for them. But yet at the same time, the affirmative team should be able to explain to you what the impact of that concession is, right? They shouldn't just leave it alone. They should also come up and say, see, they didn't respond to this, which means that really hurts their case because of the following reasons. Do teams have to provide a criteria when they begin the debate? No. They can and they're welcome to. And the negative team can challenge the criteria of the affirmative team, and you can have many criteria to assess the debate, or they can agree on the criterion. Doesn't matter. But they don't have to. As a judge, you shouldn't be lazy. You have to, if there is no explicit criteria, then you have to track what seems to be important in the debate and use that as a criteria. So the criteria can be extracted from the speeches, even if they are not explicitly labeling it as, this is the standard. What if someone says something that seems offensive? That's really unfortunate, and we should all make sure that we are sensitive to cultural, racial, religious, ethnic, national, sexual orientation differences. We should keep that in mind all the time. But at the same time, also remember that offense is subjective. So if you are a judge and you find some arguments to be offensive, do not immediately disregard them, because it might also be a product of your personal bias. So you should check yourself and ask yourself, even if I am personally offended, is this argument logical? Is there evidence presented for this argument? And if there is, you must treat the argument fairly and objectively and not let your bias get in the way. If you are still bothered after the debate, so make a decision and treat it like you would any other argument in the round. But after the debate, if you are still bothered by it, then you can come talk to me or to Steve or to Logan and explain, or to Margot, and explain to us what happened, and we will talk to the speakers involved and try to clarify or mediate. So that's if the ideas are offensive to you. Do not prejudge them, right? Just judge them as you would any other idea. What if the manner or the disposition of the team was offensive? What if they were so rude to the other speakers? You can remind the teams about decorum in the debate. You can go, this is a formal affair, you're supposed to not be noisy, or you are not supposed to call each other names. But at the same time, do not make the team lose automatically. I can imagine they would be less persuasive and less credible, but all these complaints about offense should be settled outside the debate, not during the debate. Because we don't want people to be vigilante and just deciding that everything is offensive. Because that's not for you to decide. That's for a panel to decide, right? Alright, other tricky issues. So some judges have some nightmare scenarios that we've investigated. So the first nightmare scenario they have is, what if someone has a policy and someone has a value and they just stick to their policy and they just stick to their value? What are we going to do? My response to that is, that never happens. It is impossible to have purely a policy without telling us why you want to do the policy or what the benefits of the policy are. And the moment you get into those arguments, you are already talking about values. So there will always be something to compare. Sometimes debaters will not use the label themselves, policy or value. But that doesn't mean it's not there. As a judge, you find it, right? And you measure and you weigh it. So this nightmare scenario that there will be policy versus value is not as nightmare-ish as you think. There will always be value arguments. The next is, and this is a fair dilemma, what if one team had very good reasoning and logic, but they had no evidence? What if another team had lots of evidence, but no reasoning and logic? What am I going to do? So again, I don't think this is really going to happen in real life, because teams that have really good evidence are probably likely to explain their evidence for the evidence to be persuasive. Because you're not going to think that if they just listed countries and names, that's valid evidence in the first place. Because for evidence to be valid, they need to have some explanation, some common theme. And also if a team is very good with logic, there probably is some evidence embedded in the logic. It might not be very strong. So what you do is, again, identify which team is best able to balance these things. Don't panic, and you need to have faith that these nightmare things are not going to happen. Next question. What is a low point win? What is this creature? So for this format, it is possible that the winning team can have lower points than the losing team. We can imagine that this is rare. It's usually an exceptional case. And for this tournament, if you're a judge who gives low point wins all the time, we might ask you questions. We might take you into a room and ask you questions. But what are possible scenarios where low point wins happen? This can happen if, a team might have lost on ideas, but they had much better style. So the individual speakers are being rewarded for their style. Or maybe the team is a really good speaker and there's just an imbalance or whatever, I don't know. But there are possible scenarios where this can happen. Less likely, obviously, because for you to win on the ideas, you all generally have to be persuasive. So if there is a low point win, there is a box on the bottom of your ballot that you must check, or else we will be in trouble. Scoring. So I'll turn over to Marco to discuss scoring. Judges, please pay close attention to this because you'll have to score the debate after.
Right. So the point scale runs from 18 to 30. 18 is the lowest number of points you can give to a debater for a speech, and 30 is the maximum. The extremes rarely happen. You rarely get the speech that is 18 or 19 points, and we rarely get a speech that is 29 or 30 points. It may happen, but rarely. Most of the speeches will be scored somewhere in the middle. So in the range of 20 to 22 will be weak speeches, speeches that have errors in logic or reasoning, speeches that maybe have inadequate evidence. Then between 23 and 25 will be average speeches, where everything is in place. You have your arguments, you have your evidence, structure is there, it's well presented. There's nothing extremely special about the speech, but everything is there. And then above 25, you get into very good speeches. You get speeches where there is very good reasoning. Debaters make it very clear for you. And you see that there's a lot of evidence, or very good evidence, to back up those claims. And they do a great job presenting those speeches. So that's the range from 25 to 28. And above 28, then is the exceptionally good speeches. Again, during the tournament, you will have this same scoring table on the back of your ballot. So if you forget anything, just look at the back of the ballot, you'll have it there. But for the demo debate, you have ballots which don't have it on the back. So remember it please from here. So once more, every coach and judge during the demo debate, we will be giving you ballots in a second. Please fill out the ballot, and please, when you hand in the ballot, give us your notes of the debate. We want to look at them for use in a later lab about note taking. So we want your notes, but just for the demo debate.